on a minute. Are you seriously saying Toyota's considering a return to F1? With Haas of all teams? Well, if you want to get technical, Toyota's technically never left Formula 1. Now let me preface this by saying that this is only a rumour thus far from Racing News 365, which picked up the story from its Hungarian source, Formula.hu. But it is seriously worth considering because even though Toyota's been a little bit coy in regards to potentially returning to Formula 1, it's certainly got many fingers in many pies, which included last year the signing of one of its drivers to the McLaren development programme, Ryo Hirakawa, as well as the team hosting the chairman of Toyota, Akio Toyoda, at the Japanese Grand Prix last year, meaning that the company has certainly not distanced itself from the sport, even though Akio Toyoda was quick to say that this didn't necessarily mean a return to the sport itself, but instead wanting to facilitate the opportunity of Formula 1 to one of its drivers if it came along. And let's not forget good old faithful, the Cologne wind tunnel, the subject of many a debate. It's certainly done the rounds, hasn't it? It was the wind tunnel of McLaren for the longest time when their one on location was shuttered and has only stopped being used by them since their new wind tunnel came online. Other teams have used it as well, including Toyota themselves, Ferrari for a time, as well as Caterham, whilst their own wind tunnels were either under construction or undergoing massive repairs or overhauls. And then of course most recently, Andretti took up residence as part of its own attempts to get into F1. Now granted, it's not the most up-to-date wind tunnel in existence in the sport, but it's certainly better than nothing, and it still means that Toyota's continued on its legacy in Formula 1 ever since it dropped the team in 2009 due to financial concerns due to the crisis back then. It even had gone so far as developing the 2010 Formula 1 car, which was rumoured to be pretty good. And now if these reports are accurate, it could be making a return with an existing team, instead of trying to go it alone like Andretti is and starting from scratch. A deal with Haas might be struck going into the new regulation cycle in 2026, and that maybe the team might present itself with Toyota colours and branding as early as next season. Although, to be fair, I don't think you would really notice the difference between Toyota and Haas's colours because black, red, white, it's essentially the same. So basically, you just get yourself a Haas Toyota Gazoo racing outfit. Why do they say Gazoo? I mean, it's fun to say, but actually, what is this? Oh, okay, it's a portmanteau of sorts. Oh, I see! Engineers in garages visualize images of cars. Oh, that's clever! And it's fun to say. Gazoo. Like the broke car company. Kazoo. Yeah, I'm nearly 40. The article then discusses that the deal with Toyota and Haas would be a slow and steady integration instead of Toyota just going all in, buying out the team, or forging an F1 team from scratch again. You remember back when they joined in 2002, it seemed like a really strong, ambitious and bold effort, with Mika Salo being a hot topic, but then as the years rolled on, it was clear that this was simply not going to work due to many little problems, including the fact that many of its initial signings consisted of people who worked in rally and sports car instead of Formula 1. There was too much corporate interference from Japan, and that was extremely sluggish when it came to feedback loops, and also it was just going against the grain of what to expect from Formula 1. The Toyota way of doing things, meaning that we're going to do it our way, and that of course playing a part in sacking Mike Gascoigne, essentially their team principal. And they also fumbled the transition to V8 engines, and then of course HQ forcing the move away from Michelin tyres to Bridgestone tyres, because Japan. And granted, Bridgestone would become the sole tyre supplier for 2007, but before then, come on! You had to be on Michelin, or you had to succumb to Bridgestone, who essentially developed their tyre for the Ferrari car. And when you think about it, 2006 was pretty much the death knell of any chance of them being competitive. 2005 was great, so many podiums, their driver lineup was pretty competitive, Mike Gascoigne was good, he had an idea about how to run a Formula 1 team, and their V10 was pretty competent. Now though, this seems to be looking like a much more measured second attempt. The steps potentially back into F1 would initially consist of Toyota branding being plastered over the 2025 Haas car, with some of their regular corporate partners and sponsors coming along for the ride, which would make Gene Haas very happy. These include the likes of Denso, Panasonic, PIAA, oh that's a 90s throwback, Asahi, that's the beer company, or Pocari Sweat, it's not as bad as it sounds, it's actually quite nice, that energy drink. And then of course the now infamous Mobile One. Ultimately I think Denso and Panasonic will definitely come along with Toyota because they've been around with them for yonks now, especially on their Toyota F1 cars. And Haas do need sponsors to help prop up the MoneyGram deal which Gunther Steiner brokered. Oh, I think I'm beginning to understand what's going on here. Sure, the MoneyGram deal is a pretty good one, it's pretty lucrative, it's an American company, and it's certainly not a questionable in terms of who operates it, but maybe I'm starting to see what's going on here and perhaps a new era of Haas is dawning. I'll get to that later because I think this is going somewhere. This to me does seem pretty legit because I remember last year there were rumblings about what was going to happen with the Alfa Romeo brand in Formula 1 because they were ending their contract with Sauber, and then there were discussions about maybe they took up the deal with Haas perhaps, with a $20 million a year deal to go alongside the MoneyGram deal, so it would be Alfa Romeo, MoneyGram, Haas F1 team. It would have been a bit of a mouthful, but Gene Haas would have certainly had a lot of extra cash. But then ultimately it seemed to have broken down. And according to Alfa Romeo's boss, it seemed like they wanted more than just a branding deal. And based on all what's been going on lately and what's been unearthed since Gunther Steiner left, Gene Haas has become quite adamant in not wanting to share any of Haas at all. He is the sole owner and he's going to keep it that way. And supposedly that had something to do with Ryan Reynolds' operation trying to buy into Haas, not working, and them going over to Alpine. And that meant he especially rejected Andretti's offer. Apparently he called Gene Haas many times over the last few years. But this Toyota deal, though? This could be different because it could offer many opportunities. Then there would be the next step, which would include Toyota perhaps beginning to manufacture and develop parts with Haas for their 2026 car, either in cooperation with Dallara or without Dallara. Dallara, of course, being one of the biggest manufacturers of motorsport chassis on the planet. And where would this operation take place? Well, of course it would be taking place at Toyota's facility in Cologne, where their wind tunnel is. Sure, you got to transport parts from Banbury and Oxfordshire all the way to Germany and back, but it's optimized for the Toyota staff. So that kind of integration is not something you necessarily have, because McLaren didn't even have that, even though they worked with them for many years, and they also wouldn't have to share the wind tunnel with Ferrari, which they currently do at the moment, even though they also have a wind tunnel which they call Windshare somewhere in the UK. But then Gunther Steiner mentioned last year they weren't really getting much out of it. They were getting more out of the Maranello wind tunnel, and they were going to be moving operations there to try and make things more efficient because, you know, they've got a storage cupboard in Italy. And I personally think the idea of Toyota taking up the responsibility of manufacturing the chassis and parts would make a lot of sense because nowadays with the cost cap, it's a lot more cost effective in which to make them. And also, Dallara is kind of busy with producing chassis for other motorsports, including IndyCar, Formula 2, Formula 3, practically every single motorsport you can think of, Dallara's got something to do with it. So they are kind of spread thin. Now, before we continue, I would just like to say that this part of the video is not sponsored by anybody. Sorry, I didn't want to get your hopes up here. I just wanted to provide some clarification. Toyota has said no to returning to F1 in the past, as recently as last year in fact. True, their European supervisor Kazuki Nakajima did give a clear no at the time, but he did not rule out a return in the long run. And now that F1 has succeeded in getting more car makers to enter the sport, the new rules might see Toyota want to try and get into it once more. Again, it's a lot less costly than it was back in the 2000s, when I think Toyota spent nearly $500 million just to get 5th place in the constructors. That's absolutely ludicrous. Even with the supposed increase in the cost cap to $220 million, they don't necessarily have to foot all of the bill because, well, Gene Haas would be doing that. It would be some sort of cooperation. They'd be back in Formula 1, which is more popular than ever. And also, most importantly, they would have Formula 1 personnel who knew a thing or two about the sport. And not to mention, at the moment, the European arm of Toyota in motorsport seems to be a lot more attuned to what's going on and there is less corporate meddling. They're not going to be going into this wholesale and having to start from the beginning and trying to source stuff because, well, Haas has already got that. Sure, it's not the most advanced team on the grid, but given the turnaround in form as of late, and looking likely to have their best season since 2018, they're doing a decent enough job, and of course, having a Japanese team principal is pretty good in terms of optics. Even though, admittedly, Ayo Komatsu has had more experience with Honda power since he got into Formula 1 with British American Racing when they were powered by Honda, it's still a pretty good opportunity, a Japanese team principal, partnering with a Japanese company, and considering how good Haas have been as of late, it's just gonna have to make me just shout, "Hey yo!" Not to mention Honda's getting back in the game in 2026 for the billionth time, so maybe Toyota's feeling a little bit frisky given its success in rally and world endurance. It might feel like, yeah, we want to give Formula 1 a go again, now that it's much cheaper, and we certainly want to beat Honda, because I think, quite frankly, Aston Martin at the moment and Honda, that might not be too hard. That being said, though, if it all goes well, the article does mention that potentially there could be a takeover of Haas over a period of years rather than a hard and fast deal, and maybe this might be an opportunity to get Ritomo Miyata into the sport, considering he's doing pretty well in F2, and he was the Super Formula champion last year, beating Liam Lawson. You know, he's doing good enough for his rookie year. Now we get to the meat of this topic. Why? Why would Toyota want to partner up with Haas of all teams. Why would Gene Haas want to move away from Ferrari, considering how much he's bandied on about they're not actually getting involved with Ferrari enough at the moment? They're not giving up on Ferrari anytime soon. They're still going to be powered by Ferrari because Toyota, even if they are wanting to get into Formula 1, it's far too late getting a power unit ready for 2026. Many other manufacturers, including Audi and now Honda, have been developing their power unit as far back as maybe 2021 or 2022 when the basic regulations were being formulated. They're now completely locked in stone. So if Toyota decided, yeah, I want to make an F1 engine, and it would be pretty bad. And there's no rush because right now Haas has become the Ferrari B team and making use of the collaborative efforts at the moment. Gene wishing to lean on this arrangement as much as possible to save costs, which includes having a base at the Ferrari factory itself, them using the Maranello wind tunnel, like I mentioned before, them having a power supply agreement, as well as using other parts and components that Ferrari provide. And this is a sort of deal that's akin to Aston Martin and Williams. It's like a technical partnership of sorts, and they're making the most of the fact that the Sauber deal is slowly being phased out because they're going to become Audi. Then there's of course the signing of Oliver Behrman for many years, him being the lead driver of the Ferrari Driver Academy as of late, and now Haas's rookie driver for 2025, who's passed his development time with Haas with flying colours with 3 FP1 sessions still to go. He was scheduled for 6 this year, and Ayo Komatsu doesn't seem to be bothered with the fact that his F2 campaign so far has only heralded 1 sprint victory, and the rest of it has been either riddled with reliability issues or silly mistakes and what have you. Prama's not really had a good year, has it, at the moment? It's really struggled with the brand new F2 car, mind you. Many teams have been struggling with the brand new F2 cars, just like they did in 2018 with those brand new F2 cars at the time. Yeah, this is a growing pains year for Formula 2. This is nothing new. You know, stalling clutches and engines going bang. It's typical of F2. That really needs to change. And besides, the Ferrari engine deal doesn't run out until 2028, which is fine by Gene, and if Ferrari continue to produce good machinery, then Toyota need not make their own power unit before then, just like Cadillac. Because 2028, that seems like a reasonable time to get into the game if you want to get with these existing power units, because that's what Cadillac is doing before 2028, then recognizing that coming in with Andretti for 2026 with their own power unit would be a little bit foolish and irrational. So therefore, you know, let Toyota find out what F1's like at the moment, see what the regulations are like, and then go from there. Or maybe better yet, given the fact that Toyota has been a little bit slow, hesitant and stubborn when it comes to full electric power, with the BZ4X being the only all-electric car available on sale in the UK at the moment. I don't know what it's like across the world, but either way, they've been really known for having hybrids with the Prius and what have you. Now, it seems likely that the world's going back to hybrid power, or maybe they might be liking the idea of what Stefano Domenicali has been touting, that he's open to the idea in 2030 of potentially the new engine regulations of Formula 1 going back to typical combustion engines, albeit with synthetic fuels and e-fuels. These regulations would probably be a lot cheaper too, given the fact that synthetic fuels have been invested in for many years. Aramco's going to be using them in 2026. By 2030, it might be really cost effective and not much different than regular petrol. So maybe Toyota might be open to the idea. It'd be a lot cheaper, there wouldn't be any batteries to consider, and besides, Formula 1 can't go all electric anyway until 2040 because Formula E's got an exclusivity deal for that kind of series until 2039. Then there's the idea of mine that Haas maybe wants to purge as much of Gunther Steiner from the team as possible. Initially, when the team principal left last year, it seemed like it was just a decision like they simply didn't want to continue the contract. But as the months have followed, there's been more discord coming out of the woodwork, more resentment, more anger, and it's all escalated into a situation where every single person from Haas thinks that Gunther Steiner was a bad manager, that there's now a court case going on regarding who can use what branding or likenesses and what have you. Steiner's sued Haas has sued back. It's gotten really messy, and it's all going to end in the courts, and that's really unfortunate. It just really soured itself. But let's be fair here though. Gunther was the one to get Haas off of the ground in the first place, doing it in a timely manner as well, whilst also making sure the team was quite competent in its first season. He brokered the Ferrari engine deal, he brokered the Dallara deal, which was quite innovative at the time, going practically full customer with barely any parts made in-house. He set up the Banbury factory, he set up the North Carolina facility for the F1 team. He did a lot, and that should really be given credit. Gunther knows how to make things happen and get the initial framework in place. However, as things developed and things adapt, that's where Steiner sort of struggles, and 2019 pretty much summed that up. There were slight tweaks with the front wing design. They then got the situation with tyre degradation at the front especially, which became an issue. They then had questionable sponsorship arrangements with Rich Energy and then Uralkali. Oh, it was a really bad time for Haas, and they just became a joke at this point. And the only reason that Gunther Steiner even survived in that seat for as long as he did was because of Drive to Survive. It made Haas relevant, recognizable, interesting. People wanted to be fans of Haas because of Gunther, but that had a really fine time limit, and by 2023 it was clear that there were no controversies going on. It was just a team that was really down on its luck, and there was just nothing special. Even Drive to Survive recognised it. There were barely any funny quotes of Gunther that year. And now Steiner's even admitted that, yeah, maybe on reflection I should have left the team a little bit sooner. I stayed too long. Alright, I outstayed my welcome. Only now, with Steiner gone, has the team recovered somewhat and now has a clear development path on track, which has resulted in maximising Nico Hülkenberg's potential and thrust the team away from the backmarkers for sure. With Komatsu's vision coming good this quickly, I'm pretty sure that he and Gene are looking to get rid of as much as Gunther Steiner's influence as possible, which will include dealings with sponsors, dealings with drivers, renovating what's been going on with management, and basically just not relying on funny little gimmicks and what have you. Sure, it might make them a little bit less characterful, and you know, the Chipotle sponsorship has been pretty funny and amusing at points, but they want to be taken seriously and look like a competitive team, and of course be the flag bearer of America. Considering all the pressure from Andretti, Haas needs to really go, right, we need to be taken seriously if we want to fly the American flag and also start being competitive. And the last few races have really done a good job and made America sort of proud of Haas in a way. Yes, of course, it's an American team, but it's still based in the UK and Italy and America. It's now run by a Japanese guy. They're potentially partnering up with a Japanese automaker, one of the biggest in the world. But hey, Americans like winners, and so far, Haas is doing pretty well in itself. Then there's the supposed rumours about Esteban Ocon confirmed for the second seat, pushing out Kevin Magnussen. Again, purging the Gunther effect. And that might mean he's Oliver Behrman's partner for next year. Oh no, I hope he behaves and he doesn't give Oliver Behrman an aneurysm or anything, because right now, Ocon's lucky to even have a seat for next year, given the fact that I don't think Mercedes would take him, Williams isn't going to take him, he's not a team player, as we've seen with all of the antics post his supposed sacking. But when I predicted this last year, I didn't expect Haas to be this competent. This might have actually turned out to be a decent deal. That maybe this might have been a last resort affair for Esteban. But you know what? Given these Toyota rumours, maybe Ocon was made privy to them. Maybe he realised, oh, okay, I could be on the ground floor here with some sort of semi-works deal, which could then evolve into a full-blown Toyota Gazoo operation. That's not exactly a bad situation to find myself in, given what's happened with Alpine. It might be actually turning out to be a better deal than going to Audi at the moment, because right now, Haas is on the uptrend. Their wind tunnel correlation issues, well, there aren't any. Turns out they're actually really good. And in fact, according to Haas, they said they actually get better results than they do in the wind tunnel, which is weird and a nice little surprise. So Haas might actually turn out to be a pretty solid team. Not exactly front field or top of the midfield, but, you know, solid sixths and sevenths, which is not too shabby. To work for a Toyota-Haas partnership, given Toyota's success, and with a more grounded understanding of European motorsport with Kamui Kobayashi and Kazuki Nakajima to hand, even if it didn't come to pass, Haas still looks like a far better team than it used to be, and Ferrari isn't a terrible partner in any sense either. In any case, I like this rumour. I really hope this is true, because it does seem logical, and it does seem like the next step in Ayo Komatsu's plan in refreshing Haas into a brand new team completely devoid of all the gimmicks and chicanery that Gunther Steiner became famous for. Sure, it had its place for a while, but it was time that Haas really needed to regenerate itself, especially coming from pressure from Andretti in them becoming the flag-bearer American team in Formula 1. Haas needed to step up their act, and this is a really good step in that direction. Nico Hülkenberg has really catapulted them into the limelight, because he chose the upgrades this time around for Silverstone because they're now inspired by McLaren, and Kevin Magnussen chose not to, which shows another indicator that, yeah, Nico Hülkenberg's more keen to adapt, whereas Magnussen isn't, and he was kind of like that last year, but it could be a sustainable and intelligent way of Toyota getting back into F1 without too much capital being spent up front on it. And if they did want to transform into a full works operation, it would be a smoother transition than just coming in blindly. And maybe Toyota of Japan would be far less intrusive and more accepting about how F1 works, you know, instead of bulldozing their way through, which has led to middling performances. Not to mention the fact that at the moment, Toyota is pretty financially sound. It's still one of the biggest companies on the planet, right up there with General Motors and Ford. So maybe it might want to go toe-to-toe with these manufacturers from America versus Japan in that sense again. And also, this might be a great opportunity for Oliver Behrman. If he ends up remaining at Haas for the foreseeable future, if Lewis Hamilton decides to stay at Ferrari longer than the supposed 3-year contract which is touted by Fred Vasseur, and Charles Leclerc decides to keep on staying with Ferrari until 2029, meaning that the Brit has no room, being at Haas with this Toyota collaboration might actually be a pretty sound decision. And as for Ocon, well, this looks like a better short to medium term deal than Sauber would be, because right now there are so many question marks regarding that operation, and I fully understand why now Carlos might not want to be part of that operation, and why I think Sauber's pretty much given up on getting Carlos, because right now they are down in the dumps. Something that I discussed in this video here that you can go and watch right now, because even Williams is scoring decent points. So far these guys have no points. No points! Oh.